The old man's hand found the rock hammer before his eyes could adjust to the dark. The handle was cold. The steel head, scarred from 40 years of striking stone, fit his palm like a key in a lock. He had not held this hammer in 23 years. He had not expected to hold it again. He had certainly not expected to hold it while his wife of 54 years pressed herself against his back, her breath warm against his collar, both of them listening for footsteps that did not come. The mine entrance had been sealed with a steel grate in 1971. Harold knew this because he had welded it himself, had signed the inspection report, had watched the county clerk file the deed restriction that said no entry, condemned, dangerous. But the grate was gone now. Cut through with a portable angle grinder, the cuts fresh, the metal still bright where the blade had bit. Someone had been here. Someone had come down into the dark ahead of them. Vera's fingers tightened on his shoulder. Harold. The grate. I know. She did not ask the next question. She did not need to. The question was not who cut the grate. The question was why they had cut it. And the question beneath that question, the one that neither of them would speak aloud, was whether the people who had cut it were still inside. Harold's thumb found the switch on the side of his headlamp. He had worn this lamp every shift for 31 years. The rubber was cracked, the strap had been replaced twice. But the bulb still burned, and the beam still cut through the dark like a knife through butter, and when he clicked it on the light fell across a metal sign bolted to the rock wall, and the sign said, Tuesday Mining Company, EST. 1912, Level 3, Camp D, out and enter with authorization. The date on the sign was 1943. The cold did not care that they were old. It did not care that Harold had spent 31 years underground, that his knees were shot, that his hands curled into fists now when the temperature dropped below freezing. The cold did not care that Vera had taught third grade for 42 years, that she had raised 3 children, that she had baked a cake every Friday for 50 years and never once burned the bottom. The cold took them anyway. It found them on the morning of December 12th in the house they had bought in 1969, the house with the wraparound porch and the oak tree that Harold had planted when their first son was born. The cold came through the windows that no longer fit their frames, through the gaps in the siding that Harold could no longer climb a ladder to repair, through the roof that had not been replaced since 1987. The furnace had stopped working on December 10th. On December 11th, Harold had called his son. His son lived 20 minutes away. He sold luxury cars. He drove a black Mercedes sedan with heated seats and a navigation system that could find any address in the continental United States. Dad, I can't just drop everything. I have a closing tomorrow. You know how it is. Harold knew how it was. On December 12th, Vera had called their daughter. Their daughter lived in the city. She was a real estate agent. She specialized in properties over $1 million. She had a key to the house, had always had a key, had promised when she moved out that she would always be there if they needed her. Mom, I'm showing a property in the morning. Maybe I can come by after lunch? Lunch came. Lunch went. At 3 in the afternoon, the temperature inside the house dropped to 42 degrees. At 4, Harold's hands stopped working properly. At 5, Vera wrapped herself in every blanket they owned and sat in the kitchen with the oven door open, the gas flame the only warmth left in the world. At 6, Harold made a decision. He had made many decisions in his life. He had decided to marry Vera 3 weeks after meeting her. He had decided to take the job at the mine even though his mother had begged him not to. He had decided to stay in the house after the children left, even though it was too big for 2 people, even though the repairs were piling up, even though the stairs were getting harder to climb every year. This decision was different. This decision was the last one. He went to the hall closet. He opened the door. He reached past the coats they no longer wore, past the boots that no longer fit, and pulled out a canvas bag he had not touched since 2001. Inside the bag, 2 headlamps, 4 sets of spare batteries, a roll of flagging tape, a first aid kit, a lighter, a compass, a map folded so many times the creases had begun to tear, and the rock hammer. He had bought the hammer in 1959, his first year of field work. The handle was hickory. The head was forged steel, the pick end ground to a point that could split shale like butter. He had used it to sample every claim on the Tuesday mine property. He had used it to map every tunnel, every shaft, every drift. He knew every inch of that mine. He knew which supports were sound and which were rotten. He knew where the water seeped and where it stayed dry. He knew about Camp B, the old miners' camp on Level 3, sealed in 1943 when the war pulled the men away and the Tuesday Mining Company folded. He had never told anyone about Camp B, not his children, not the county inspector, not even Vera. He had kept it as a secret, the way men keep secrets about places that belong only to them. a place that existed outside of time, a place that would still be there when everything else was gone. He had not expected to need it, but the cold was in the house now, and the house was not their home anymore, and the children were not coming, and Harold was 78 years old, and he knew that if they stayed one more night in that house they would not wake up. Vera. She looked up from the oven. Her face was gray with cold. Her hands were shaking. "We're leaving." "Where?" "To the mine." She did not argue. She did not ask if he was sure. She just stood up, let the blankets fall, and went to the bedroom to pack a bag. She packed 2 changes of clothes, a photograph of her mother, a small wooden box that contained every letter Harold had ever written her, and her grade book. The grade book was leather-bound red, with gold lettering that had long since worn away. She had carried it through 42 years of teaching. Every student she had ever taught was in that book. Their names, their grades, their attendance records, the little notes she had in the margins in pencil. Timmy loves dinosaurs. Read to him. Maria, shy. Pair with confident reader. James, trouble at home. Be patient. She had not opened the grade book in 12 years. She did not open it now. She just held it against her chest, the way she had held her babies when they were small, and followed her husband out the door. The car started on the 3rd try. The heater blew cold for the first 10 minutes. The roads were empty. The sky was black. The moon was a razor's edge, thin and sharp and cold. They drove for 45 minutes up the mountain road that Harold had not traveled in 20 years. The road was overgrown. The trees had grown so close that their branches scraped against the sides of the car. The pavement ended, turned to gravel, turned to dirt, turned to nothing. Harold stopped the car at the edge of a clearing. The mine entrance was a dark mouth in the rock face, blacker than the night around it, and the grate was gone. Harold Michael Porter was born in 1945 in a mining town that no longer exists. The town was called Copper Creek, though there was no creek and the copper had played out in 1923. By the time Harold was born, the only thing left was the mine, the company store, and 47 houses that leaned into the wind like old men waiting for the end. Harold's father worked underground for 39 years. He died at 62, his lungs full of rock dust, his hands too twisted to hold a fork. He left behind a widow, 3 children, and a mortgage that took 12 years to pay off. Harold swore he would never go underground. But the mine paid better than anything else, and his mother needed the money, and the war was over, but the world was still hungry for copper. And so at 18 Harold put on a hard hat and followed his father's footsteps into the dark. He lasted 6 months before he quit, not because of the fear, not because of the dust, but because he looked at the mine maps one day and realized they were wrong. The tunnels were drawn in the wrong places. The ore bodies were mislabeled. The whole operation was running on bad information, and men were dying because of it. Harold taught himself geology. He read every book the county library had. He took correspondence courses from the Colorado School of Mines. He spent his weekends walking the hills with a rock hammer, mapping the surface outcrops, building his own picture of what lay beneath. In 1966, he walked into the Tuesday Mine office with a hand-drawn map that showed a copper vein the company had missed for 30 years. The vein turned out to be real. It was not a big vein. It would not make anyone rich. But it was enough to keep the mine open for another 5 years, enough to keep 200 men employed, enough to make Harold Porter the most respected geologist in the district. He worked for the Tuesday Mine for 31 years. He mapped every tunnel, every drift, every cross-cut. He knew the mountain the way a priest knows his parish, the way a farmer knows his fields. He could feel the rock in his sleep, could smell the difference between a good face and a bad one, could hear the whisper of water moving through fractures that no one else knew existed. In 1971, he sealed Level 3. The decision was not his alone. The company had been bought out by a larger operation. The new owners wanted to consolidate, to close the older levels, to focus on the main shaft. Harold was given the job of decommissioning, of making safe, of sealing. He knew about Camp B. He had found it in the old records, a reference to a satellite camp on Level 3, established in 1912, closed in 1943. The records said the camp had been stripped, evacuated, abandoned. The records said there was nothing there worth saving. Harold did not believe the records. So when he sealed Level 3, he did not tell anyone that he was leaving the door open. Not a door, exactly. A passage. A crawl space behind a false wall, hidden behind a section of rock that looked like solid face, but was actually a thin veneer of shotcrete over a void. He had found it by accident, while mapping a ventilation drift. He had not reported it because he was not sure it was real. By the time he was sure, the sealing was complete, and reporting it would have meant paperwork, investigations, delays. So he kept the secret. He told himself he was saving it for later, for retirement, For the book, he would write about the history of mining in the region, but the book never got written. The years passed. The secret settled into the back of his mind like dust settling on a shelf, until the cold came, until the children did not. Vera Ellen Porter was born in 1946, in the same town and the same hospital, 3 months after Harold. Their mothers had been friends. Their fathers had worked the same shift. They had grown up together, gone to school together, fallen in love together in the way that small towns produce couples. Not through choice, but through gravity. Vera was the first person in her family to go to college. She had wanted to be a teacher since she was 7 years old, since the day her third-grade teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, had pulled her aside after class and said, "You have a gift, Vera. You see people. Most people don't see people." She saw people. She saw the shy ones, the scared ones, the ones who came to school hungry and went home to worse. She saw the ones who could not read and the ones who read too much, the ones who drew pictures in the margins of their notebooks and the ones who stared out the window and dreamed of escape. She taught for 42 years. She taught in the same school, in the same classroom, with the same wooden desk that had been there since 1948. The desk had been carved with generations of initials, had been scarred by scissors and pencils and the occasional Thrown eraser. Vera loved that desk the way Harold loved his hammer. She taught third grade because third grade was the year everything changed. In third grade, children stopped learning to read and started reading to learn. In third grade, the world opened up. In third grade, you could still save a child, could still catch them before they fell through the cracks. Vera caught many children. She caught the ones whose parents were alcoholics, whose parents were abusive, whose parents simply did not care. She caught the ones who were too smart for their own good and the ones who were not smart enough and the ones who were smart but too scared to show it. She kept a grade book. Every student she ever taught was in that book. Every name. Every grade. Every note she made in the margins, in pencil, in her neat teacher's handwriting. The grade book was her map. The way Harold's hammer was his. They married in 1969 on a Saturday in June. The ceremony was small, 2 witnesses, a justice of the peace, a potluck reception in the church basement. Harold wore his only suit. Vera wore a white dress she had sewn herself. They had 3 children. The first, Michael, was born in 1971. He was a difficult baby, colicky, never slept, screamed for hours for no reason. Vera walked him through the house at 3 in the morning, singing songs her mother had sung to her. The second, Sarah, was born 1974. She was quiet, watchful, old before her time. She learned to read at 4, and by 6 she was reading at a 10th grade level. Vera taught her in the evenings, after the dishes were done, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of library books. The third, James, was born in 1978. He was the easy one, the golden child, the one who never caused any trouble. He was also the one who left first, who went to college on the coast and never came back. They raised the children in the house with the wraparound porch. They paid off the mortgage in 1995. They retired in 2005, within 6 months of each other. They expected the children to visit. The children visited on holidays, sometimes, when it was convenient. Michael sold luxury cars. He had a wife, 2 children, a house with a pool. He sent money on birthdays, checks that Harold cashed but never spent. Sarah sold real estate. She had a partner, a condo in the city, a calendar that was always full. She called on Sundays, brief conversations that ended with "I have to go." James sold software. He lived in another state, another time zone, another world. He emailed once a month, short messages that said nothing. The children did not come for Christmas in 2022. They did not come for Harold's 78th birthday. They did not come when the furnace broke. The car rattled to a stop in the clearing. Harold killed the engine. The silence rushed in like water through a breach. Vera sat in the passenger seat, her grade book pressed against her chest, her breath fogging the windshield. She did not ask if they were in the right place. She did not ask if Harold was sure about the mine. She just waited, the way she had waited through childbirth and sickness and the long, slow dissolution of a family. Harold opened his door. The cold hit him like a wall. He walked to the mine entrance. The grate was not just open, it was destroyed. The cuts were clean, professional, made with a tool designed for the job. The hinges had been cut through. The lock had been severed. The grate lay on the ground, bent and useless. Someone had wanted in. Someone had wanted him badly enough to bring heavy equipment to work in the dark, to risk discovery. Harold shone his headlamp into the tunnel. The beam traveled 60 feet before it hit a wall. The wall was not rock. It was a bulkhead, a steel door set into a concrete frame, and the door was open. The door had been open for a long time. Dust had settled on the threshold. Cobwebs stretched from the doorframe to the rock. Tracks in the dust boot prints, many of them, Going both ways told him that this was not a new discovery. Someone had been coming here for weeks, maybe months. Harold turned back to the car. Vera was standing beside it now, her bag in one hand, her grade book in the other. She looked small against the dark mountain. She looked frail. She looked like a woman who had spent her life giving and was now being asked to give the last thing she had. "Stay close," Harold said. "I always do." He took her hand. They walked into the tunnel. The Tuesday in October had started like any other Tuesday. Harold had woken at 6, made coffee, fed the birds that gathered on the back porch. Vera had woken at 7, made toast, read the newspaper from cover to cover. The day was unseasonably warm, the kind of October day that feels like a gift, like the world is giving you one last taste of summer before the winter closes in. The children were supposed to come for dinner. That was the plan. Michael and his family, Sarah and her partner. James was flying in from the coast. It was the first time in 3 years that all three of them would be in the same room. Vera had spent the whole day cooking. She had made Harold's favorite, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the recipe her mother had taught her, the one that took 4 hours in the oven and filled the whole house with the smell of home. She had made a cake from scratch, chocolate with vanilla frosting, the same cake she had made for every birthday, every graduation, every celebration. She had set the table with the good china, the dishes she had received as a wedding gift in 1969. The children had not come. They had not called. They had not sent a message. At 6 o'clock, Harold had called Michael. "Dad, something came up. I'll try to make it next weekend." At 6:15, Harold had called Sarah. "Mom, I'm so sorry. We had a showing that ran late. I'll call you tomorrow." At 6:30, Harold had called James. The phone had rung 12 times. No answer. No voicemail. Vera had sat at the table, the good china laid out, the pot roast growing cold. She had not cried. She had not said a word. She had just sat there, looking at the empty chairs, counting the years. They had eaten the pot roast cold, standing at the kitchen counter. They had put the cake in the refrigerator. They had washed the good china by hand, dried it, put it back in the cabinet. And then they had sat in the living room, in the dark, and listened to the house settle around them, and Harold had felt something break inside him, something he had not known was still whole. The betrayal had not started on that Tuesday in October. It had started much earlier, the way rot starts in a tree, at the core, invisible, spreading outward until the bark is the only thing holding it together. Michael had been the first to leave. He had gone to college in 1989, had never come back. He had found a job selling cars, had discovered he was good at it, had discovered that he liked money more than he liked his family. He sent checks. He visited on Christmas. He called on birthdays. But his eyes were always somewhere else, his attention always on the next deal, the next sale, the next thing. Sarah had been the second. She had gone to the city in 1992, had become a real estate agent, had married a woman who did not like her parents. The woman was named Diane. Diane was polite, professional, and cold. She did not like the house with the wraparound porch. She did not like the way Harold told stories about the mine. She did not like the way Vera touched people when she talked to them. Diane had made it clear that Sarah's parents were not welcome in their home. Sarah had chosen Diane. James had been the last. James had always been the favorite, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He had gone to college on the coast, had gotten a job in tech, had married a woman named Angela, who had never met his parents. He sent money. He sent gifts. He sent emails that said busy and traveling and maybe next month. The children had not come for Christmas in 2022. They had not come for Harold's 78th birthday. They had not come when the furnace broke. But on that Tuesday in October, they had promised to come, and they had not. The betrayal was not the empty chairs. The betrayal was not the cold pot roast. The betrayal was what happened the next day when Harold drove to Michael's house to ask for help. Michael lived in a gated community, in a house with a 3-car garage and a front door that cost more than Harold's car. The lawn was perfect. The driveway was paved. The Mercedes sat in the driveway, black and gleaming, the windows tinted so dark you could not see inside. Harold parked his truck, 22 years old, rusted, the passenger door held shut with a bungee cord, and walked to the front door. Michael opened the door. He was wearing a suit. He was holding a phone. He looked at his father the way you look at a delivery that has arrived at the wrong address. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "The furnace is broken. I told you I'd come by." "When?" Michael looked at his phone. His thumb moved across the screen. He was not looking at his father. He was looking at something else, something more important. "I'm not sure. Things are busy right now." "Michael, it's December. It's below freezing." "I know, Dad. I'll figure something out." "When?" "I said I'll figure something out." Harold stood on the porch. The cold was seeping through his coat. He could feel it in his bones, the way he had felt it in the mine, the way the rock held the cold from winter to winter. "Your mother is scared." Michael looked up from his phone. For a moment, his eyes met his father's. For a moment, something flickered in them, something that might have been shame. "I'll come by tomorrow." He closed the door. Harold stood on the porch for a long time. He watched the Mercedes in the driveway. He watched the lights in the windows. He thought about the house he had built, the children he had raised, the life he had made. He walked back to his truck. He drove home. He did not tell Vera what Michael had said. The day they left the house, Harold called his daughter. "Sarah, the furnace is broken. We're leaving." "Leaving? Leaving where?" "To the mine." "The mine?" "Dad, that's crazy. You can't live in a mine. We can't live here. Let me talk to Michael." "Michael doesn't want to talk." "Dad, the grate is cut. Someone has been in the mine. We're going to find out who." "Dad, that's dangerous. You need to call the police." "The police don't care about us, Sarah." "That's not true. Do you care?" The silence stretched across the phone line, across the miles, across the years. "Of course I care." "Then come." "Can't, not right now. I have." "Goodbye, Sarah." He hung up. Vera was standing in the doorway, her bag packed, her grade book in her hands. She had heard the conversation. She had known how it would end. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for a long time, Harold." They walked out the door. They did not look back. The tunnel was colder than the outside. Harold had expected this. The ground holds the temperature of the season it has absorbed, and December had been cold for weeks. The rock walls radiated cold, the air was still and damp, and the only sound was the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel floor. Vera walked behind him, her hand on his shoulder. She had not let go since they entered. The headlamp cut a narrow cone of light, revealing 10 feet of tunnel at a time. The walls were rough, uneven, the marks of drills and picks still visible in the rock. The floor was littered with debris, fallen rock, rusted tools, pieces of timber that had rotted and collapsed. Harold walked slowly, testing each step before he committed his weight. His knees ached, his back ached. His hands, even in gloves, were stiff with cold, but he knew this tunnel. He had mapped it in 1969, had walked it 100 times, had measured every bend and every grade. He knew that the tunnel ran straight for 400 feet, then turned left, then dropped at a gentle angle for another 300 feet, before opening into the main drift. He knew that the bulkhead door was at the 200-foot mark. He knew that beyond the bulkhead, the tunnel was supposed to be sealed, but the bulkhead door was open, and the tracks in the dust told him that someone had been here, recently, many times. They reached the door. It was a steel bulkhead, the kind they used in the old mines, designed to hold back water or gas or men. The door was heavy, rusted, the hinges groaning as Harold pushed it open. Beyond the door, the tunnel continued, but the tunnel had changed. The walls were smoother here, the floor cleaner. Someone had swept the debris away. Someone had replaced the timbers that had rotted, had shored up the ceiling, had made the tunnel safe. Harold stopped. He shone his light ahead. 40 feet ahead, the tunnel opened into a chamber, and in the chamber there was light. A dim light, yellow, the color of an old incandescent bulb. Harold clicked off his headlamp. Vera's hand tightened on his shoulder. "What is it?" she whispered. "Someone's here." They moved forward slowly, staying close to the wall. The chamber was bigger than Harold remembered. He had not been here since 1971, and memory had compressed the space, had made it smaller than reality. The chamber was 60 feet wide, 40 feet deep, with a ceiling that rose 15 feet above the floor, and it was intact. The miners' camp, Camp B, the satellite camp that had been sealed in 1943, was still here. The wooden bunks were still against the walls. The pot-bellied stove was still in the center of the room. The shelves were still stocked with cans, jars, boxes of supplies that had been sitting here for 80 years. But the light was new. A string of LED bulbs ran along the ceiling, powered by a car battery that sat in the corner, connected to a small solar panel that had been mounted somewhere above. The light was dim, but it was enough to see by. And the camp had been lived in. A sleeping bag lay on one of the bunks. A camp stove sat on the table. A stack of books stood beside the bed. A coffee mug, still half full, sat on the edge of the table. Someone had been here. Someone had been living here. Harold walked to the table. He picked up the coffee mug. It was cold. The coffee inside had gone stale. He looked at the books. They were mining textbooks, old ones from the 1940s. Someone had been studying. He looked at the sleeping bag. It was new, high-end, the kind you buy from an outdoor catalog. He looked at the walls, and he saw the maps. The walls were covered with maps. Survey maps, topographical maps, geological maps. They were pinned to the rock with nails, their edges curling, their surfaces marked with notes and arrows and circles. Harold stepped closer. The maps were of the Tuesday mine property, all 400 acres. Every tunnel, every shaft, every drift. Someone had mapped the entire property, had marked every entrance, every ventilation shaft, every point where the mine intersected the surface, and someone had circled one spot, a spot near the eastern boundary where the mine property met the national forest. The circle was drawn in red marker. Next to it, in the same red marker, someone had written, Grant here. Harold stared at the word, Grant, land grant. The Tuesday mine property had been the subject of a title dispute for 80 years. The original owners, the Tuesday Mining Company, had claimed 400 acres. The federal government had claimed that the company's claim was invalid, that the land had been withdrawn from mineral entry in 1910. The dispute had never been resolved. The mine had been abandoned. The company had dissolved. The land had sat in legal limbo for decades. But if there was a land grant, if someone had found the original grant, Harold, Vera's voice was quiet, but there was something in it that made him turn. She was standing beside the stove. She had opened the door of the stove, had reached inside, and she was holding a strongbox. It was small, metal, painted green, the kind of box they used in the old mines to store payroll and paperwork. The paint was chipped, the surface rusted, the lock corroded and broken. It was in the stove, Vera said. Someone hid it. Harold took the box. It was heavier than it looked. He carried it to the table, set it down, opened the lid. Inside, a stack of papers, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. Payroll records from 1943, timesheets, supply orders, and at the bottom, folded carefully, a document with a red seal and a ribbon. Harold unfolded the document. His hands were shaking. He read the first line, he read the second line, he read the third line, and then he understood. The document was a land grant. It had been issued by the United States Department of the Interior in 1912, signed by the Secretary of the Interior, granting the Tuesday Mining Company the rights to 400 acres of mineral land in perpetuity. The grant was legal. It was binding. It was ironclad. It meant that the Tuesday Mining Company owned the land. It meant that the federal government's claim was invalid. It meant that the title dispute was resolved. But more than that, it meant that the land, all 400 acres, belonged to whoever held the grant. And the grant was in Harold's hands. How did this end up here? Vera asked. Harold looked at the payroll records, the time sheets, the supply orders. He looked at the date, 1943, the last year the mine was in operation, the year the war pulled the men away, the year the Tuesday Mining Company folded. Someone hid it, he said. Someone who knew what it was worth. Someone who wanted to keep it safe. Who? Harold looked at the name on the payroll records. Foreman, Daniel Porter, his grandfather. The story came together in pieces. Daniel Porter had been the foreman at Camp B in 1943. He had been responsible for the payroll, the supplies, the records. He had known about the land grant. He had known that the company was folding, that the mine was being abandoned, that the grant would be lost. So he had hidden it. He had put it in the strongbox, had sealed the box in the stove, had left it for someone to find. He had never told anyone. Not his wife, not his children, not his grandson. He had taken the secret to his grave, and now, 80 years later, Harold had found it. He sat down on the edge of the bunk. The weight of the document in his hands was heavier than any rock he had ever lifted. Harold, Vera said, "What are you going to do?" He looked at the maps on the wall, the red circle, the note, Grant here. Someone had been looking for this. Someone had known it existed. Someone had been living in this camp, searching for this document, and had not found it, because it was in the stove, because they had not thought to look there, because they had been looking for something else. Whoever was here, Harold said, they're going to come back. When? Tomorrow. We don't know. Vera looked at the strongbox. She looked at the maps. She looked at her husband, sitting on the edge of the bunk, holding a document that could change everything. What do we do? Harold stood up. He folded the document carefully, placed it back in the strongbox, closed the lid. We wait. The night was the longest of Harold's life. They did not sleep. They could not sleep. They sat in the dim light of the LED bulbs, the strongbox between them, and listened to the silence of the mountain. The silence was not absolute. The mountain made sounds, the drip of water somewhere deep underground, the creak of rock shifting under pressure, the whisper of air moving through passages that had been sealed for decades. These were sounds that Harold knew, sounds he had heard 1,000 times underground, sounds that meant the mountain was alive and breathing. But there were other sounds too, sounds that did not belong. The crunch of footsteps on gravel, the echo of voices distant and indistinct. The roar of an engine somewhere above, growing closer. They're coming, Vera said. Harold nodded. He stood up. He walked to the stove. He picked up the strongbox. Where are you going? To hide this. Where? He did not answer. He walked to the back of the chamber, where the rock wall was rough and uneven, where shadows pooled in the corners. He found a crack in the rock, a fissure that ran deep into the mountain. He pushed the strongbox into the crack. It fit perfectly. He stepped back. The strongbox was invisible in the dark. He returned to the table. He sat down. He waited. The voices grew louder. They were coming from the tunnel, the same tunnel Harold and Vera had used, male voices, rough and impatient. The echo of boots on gravel. Check the maps again. I checked them. The grant should be here. Well, it's not here. We've looked everywhere. Maybe Porter hid it somewhere else. Porter's dead. He's been dead for 60 years. Then who? They reached the chamber. The light from their headlamps flooded the space, blinding Harold and Vera for a moment. There were 3 of them. The first was a man in his 40s, tall and thin, with a face that had not learned to smile. He was wearing a Patagonia jacket and expensive hiking boots. He carried a tablet computer in one hand. The second was a woman, also in her 40s, with short gray hair and a hard look in her eyes. She was wearing Carhartt pants and a heavy coat. She carried a metal detector. The third was a man Harold recognized. It was Michael. Michael stopped when he saw his parents. For a moment his face went blank. Then the blankness was replaced by something else, something that Harold could not read. Dad, Mom, what are you doing here? We could ask you the same question. Michael looked at the man in the Patagonia jacket. The man looked back. Something passed between them, some communication that did not require words. We're looking for something, Michael said. A land grant. Michael's eyes widened. How do you know about that? I found it. You? It's hidden. You won't find it. The man in the Patagonia jacket stepped forward. His face was hard. His hands were in his pockets. Mr. Porter, my name is Thomas Crane. I'm a lawyer. I represent a group of investors who are interested in this property. I don't care who you represent. Mr. Porter, the land grant you found is not yours. It belongs to my clients. They have a legal claim to it. Based on what? Based on a purchase agreement from 1944. The Tuesday Mining Company sold the mineral rights to a holding company. That holding company was acquired by my clients in 1998. Harold looked at Michael. Is this true? Michael did not meet his eyes. It's complicated. No. It's simple. Either the grant belongs to us or it belongs to them. Which is it? Dad, I can explain. You lied to us. No, you let us freeze. You let your mother freeze. And all the time you were looking for this. Michael's face went red. His hands clenched into fists. It's not like that. Then what is it like? The silence stretched. Vera stood up. She walked to Harold's side. She took his hand. Michael, she said, we raised you. We fed you. We clothed you. We loved you. And this is how you repay us? Michael's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to Thomas Crane, then back to his parents. You don't understand. This isn't about you. This is about something bigger. Bigger than family? Vera's voice cracked. Bigger than a cabin that's fallen apart? Yes. This land, Michael gestured around the chamber, his arm sweeping across the stone walls. This land sits on top of one of the largest untapped lithium deposits in the country. Do you know what that means? That's the future. That's electric cars, batteries, everything. We're sitting on billions. Harold stared at his son. You knew. All those years we talked about selling the cabin, about the property taxes, about how we couldn't afford to keep it. You knew what was underneath it. I couldn't tell you. The NDA. You signed a non-disclosure agreement against your own family. It was necessary. The investors needed to secure the rights before word got out. If the government found out, they'd seize it through eminent domain. We had to move fast, and you were going to take it from us. Michael's face twisted. Take it. I was going to make sure you were taken care of. A percentage, a comfortable retirement, you wouldn't have to worry about anything. I don't want your percentage, Harold said. I want my son back. The woman with the metal detector stepped forward. Enough of this. Where's the grant? Harold looked at her. I don't know who you are, but you're not getting it. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, she said. I'm a geologist, and I've been working on this project for 3 years. That grant is the key to everything. Without it, we can't prove the chain of title. We lose the mineral rights. Then you lose. Thomas Crane's face hardened. Mr. Porter, I don't think you understand the situation. We have lawyers. We have resources. We can tie you up in court for years. By the time it's over, you'll have nothing left. I have nothing left now. Vera squeezed his hand. Harold, it's true, Vera. I've lost my cabin, I've lost my memories, and now I've lost my son. Looked at Michael. What else is there to lose? The chamber fell silent. Michael's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went pale. What is it? Thomas asked. Michael didn't answer. He stared at the screen, his thumb scrolling slowly. Michael, what is it? It's the news, Michael said. His voice was hollow. The federal government just announced a new critical minerals initiative. They're invoking the Defense Production Act. Thomas's face went white. No, they're nationalizing all lithium deposits on federal land, and they're retroactively reviewing all mineral rights claims from 1940 to 1960. Dr. Vasquez's metal detector clattered to the ground. That's everything. That's our entire claim. The grant doesn't matter anymore, Michael said. Even if we had it, the government can override it. They've already filed an injunction against all pending claims in this region. Thomas Crane pulled out his own phone. His fingers trembled as he scrolled. This is a disaster. The investors are going to pull out, Michael finished. I know. The three of them stood in the dim light, the weight of their failure settling over them like dust. Harold watched his son. Michael's shoulders had slumped. His face had edged 10 years in 10 minutes. It's over, Michael said quietly. It was never about the money, Harold said. It was about trust. And you broke it, Michael looked up. For the first time, his eyes were wet. Dad, I don't want to hear it. They emerged from the mine into the late afternoon light. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind had picked up, cutting through their coats like knives. Thomas Crane and Dr. Vasquez left without a word. They walked down the mountain road, their headlamps bobbing in the twilight. Michael stood by the cabin, his hands in his pockets. He looked small against the vast landscape. I'll drive you to town, he said. We'll walk. Harold said. It's 5 miles. We've walked farther. Michael nodded. He turned to go, then stopped. Maud, I'm sorry. Harold didn't answer. Vera looked at her son. Her face was unreadable. I know you are, Michael, but sorry doesn't fix what you broke. Michael opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He walked to his truck, got in, and drove away. The sound of the engine faded into the silence. The walk to town was long and cold. Harold and Vera walked side by side, their boots crunching on the packed snow. The road wound through the forest, past bare trees and frozen streams. The sky was a pale gray, the sun already sinking behind the mountains. I thought he was dead, Vera said finally. Who? Michael. When I saw him in the mine, I thought he had died, and then I realized. She stopped walking. I realized I had already lost him. A long time ago, Harold took her hand. We raised him the best we could. Did we? Or did we raise him to be exactly this? Ambitious. Willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead. I don't know. I do. Vera's voice was hard. I see myself in him the way I used to be. Before you, before the cabin, before I learned that there are things worth more than winning. Harold looked at her. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're not that person anymore, he said. I know, but he is. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And I don't know if he'll ever find his way out. They continued walking. The lights of the town appeared in the distance, small and warm against the darkening sky. They spent the night at a motel on the edge of town. The room was small and cheap, with a flickering fluorescent light and a heater that rattled when it ran. But the bed was soft, and the blankets were warm. They lay side by side in the dark, listening to the wind outside. I don't want to go back, Vera said. To the cabin? Anywhere. I don't want to go back to how things were. Neither do I. What do we do? Harold was quiet for a long time. Then he said, we go forward. We find a new place. A new home. Where? I don't know. Somewhere away from all of this. Vera turned to face him. In the dim light from the window, her face was soft and tired. You're not going to look for the strongbox again? No. Why not? Because it's not about the grant. It never was. It was about the memory of my father, and I have that. I don't need a piece of paper to prove it. Vera reached out and touched his face. I love you, Harold Porter. I love you too, Vera. He pulled her close. They held each other as the wind howled outside. The news came 3 days later. Harold was sitting in the motel room, reading a book he had found on the nightstand, a romance novel with a cover so faded he couldn't read the title when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Porter? Yes. This is Officer Daniels from the Rockbridge County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling about your son. Harold's heart stopped. What happened? Mr. Porter, your son was involved in a car accident last night on Route 29. He's alive, but he's in critical condition at UVA Medical Center. Harold closed his eyes. I'll be there. He hung up the phone. Vera was watching him from the bathroom door, a towel in her hands. What is it? Michael. He's been in an accident. Vera's face went pale. Is he alive? Critical. She dropped the towel. We have to go. The drive to Charlottesville took 3 hours. The hospital was a maze of white corridors and beeping machines. A nurse led them to the ICU, where Michael lay in a bed surrounded by tubes and wires. His face was bruised and swollen. His left arm was in a cast. A ventilator breathed for him. The doctor met them outside the room. He has a severe traumatic brain injury. We've relieved the pressure, but he's in a coma. We don't know when or if he'll wake up. Vera sat down in a chair by the bed. She took Michael's hand. "Hello, Michael," she said. "It's Mom." Harold stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. The machines beeped. The hours passed. Weeks turned into months. Michael did not wake up. Harold and Vera moved into a small apartment in Charlottesville, close to the hospital. They visited every day. Vera would talk to Michael, read to him, play his favorite music. Harold would sit in the corner, watching. The legal battle over the cabin ended quietly. The government's nationalization had made everyone's claims worthless. The cabin itself was condemned. The fire had done too much damage. The land was transferred to the state. Thomas Crane's investors sued him. He lost his license. Dr. Vasquez found work in another state. The lithium deposit sat untouched beneath the mountain. One evening, 6 months after the accident, Harold was sitting in Michael's hospital room alone. Vera had gone home to sleep. She had been up for 2 days straight, and Harold had insisted. The room was dark except for the glow of the monitors. Harold looked at his son. Michael's face had healed. The bruises were gone. He looked like he was sleeping. "I don't know if you can hear me," Harold said, "but I need to say this." The machines beeped. "I was angry at you. I was so angry. You lied to us. You betrayed us. You almost took everything we had." He paused. "But you're my son. And I can't stay angry forever." He leaned forward. "I forgive you, Michael. I don't know if you'll ever wake up. I don't know if you'll ever hear these words. But I need you to know that I forgive you." He took Michael's hand. "Please come back." The room was silent. And then Michael's fingers twitched. Michael woke up 3 days later. The recovery was slow. He had to learn to walk again, to talk again, to remember the simplest things. His memory was patchy. He remembered the accident, but not the months before it. He didn't remember the cabin. He didn't remember the mine. He didn't remember the betrayal. The doctor said the memories might come back. They might not. Harold didn't know which was worse. Michael moved into the apartment with them. He was quiet now. The ambition was gone, replaced by a softness that Harold had never seen in him before. He spent his days reading, watching old movies, sitting by the window. One afternoon, Harold found him looking at a photograph of the cabin. "Where was this?" Michael asked. "That was our home. Your home. You grew up there." Michael studied the photograph. "It looks beautiful." It was. "I feel like I should remember it." "Maybe you will, someday." Michael set the photograph down. "Dad, I know I did something bad. I don't remember what, but I can feel it, like a shadow in my chest." Harold sat down across from him. "You made a mistake. A big one, but it's over now. Did you forgive me?" "Yes." "Did Mom?" "She's working on it." Michael nodded. "I'm sorry for whatever I did. I know." A year passed. Michael continued to improve. He got a job at a bookstore, working part-time. He started dating a woman named Claire, a librarian with kind eyes and a gentle laugh. Harold and Vera found a small house on the outskirts of town. It had a garden and a porch and a fireplace that crackled on cold nights. They didn't talk about the cabin. They didn't talk about the mine. They didn't talk about the strongbox. Until the day the package arrived. It was a small box wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Harold opened it on the kitchen table. Inside was a leather journal worn and faded, and a note. The note was handwritten in a shaky, elderly hand. "Dear Harold, I found it, the strongbox. I was hiking near the old mine, and I saw the crack in the rock. I don't know how I knew to look there, but I did. I found the grant. I found your father's letter. I found everything. I'm returning the journal to you. The grant I burned. I hope you don't mind. I thought it was better that way. Some things aren't meant to be found. I'm sorry for what I did. I was young and stupid and I thought I knew what I wanted. I was wrong. I hope you can forgive me. Love." Michael. Harold read the note 3 times. Vera came up behind him and read it over his shoulder. "He remembers," she said softly. "Maybe. Or maybe he found it before the accident and forgot." "Does it matter?" Harold looked at the journal. His father's journal. The one he had lost so many years ago. "No," he said. "I suppose it doesn't." He opened the journal. The pages were filled with his father's handwriting, neat and careful. Dates, coordinates, notes about the weather, the wildlife, the feel of the earth. And in the back a letter, "To whoever finds this, I hid the land grant because I knew what it was worth. I knew it would tear this family apart. I hoped that by hiding it, I could protect my children from the greed that has destroyed so many others. I was wrong. Greed finds a way. But I hope that whoever reads this understands. The land is not the treasure. The treasure is the life you build on it, the memories you make, the people you love. Don't let a piece of paper destroy that." William Porter, 1960. Harold closed the journal. He looked out the window. The garden was green and full of flowers. Vera was in the kitchen, making tea. Michael was coming up the path, a bag of groceries in his arms. Claire was walking beside him, laughing at something he had said. The shadow in Harold's chest lifted. That evening, Harold built a fire in the fireplace. He took the journal out of the box. He flipped through the pages one last time. Then he placed it in the flames. Vera watched him from the sofa. Are you sure? Yes. The paper curled and blackened. The words dissolved into ash. Some things aren't meant to be found, Harold said. He sat down beside Vera. She leaned into him. Michael and Claire were in the kitchen, making dinner. The sound of their laughter drifted into the living room. The fire crackled. The wind blew outside. And in the dark of the garden, a single red rose bloomed under the cold light of the moon.